Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by oldsschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with Manic Expression, the Comic Book Cast, the Reopen Nickelodeon Studios in Orlando, Florida Facebook page, the PlayStation Let's Play channel, and for entertainment's sake. Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of Casual Chats. We have reached episode number 50, and it happens to be our 3rd year anniversary of Casual Chats. I am Patricia.
I am Kevin.
And today, we have ourselves a very, very special guest. A guest that we've been trying to get a hold of for a very long time. You may know him for doing interstitials for Nick at Night, the co-creators of Pete and Pete and KaBlam, and also he is the executive producer of Sanjay and Craig. We have none other than Will McRobb. Will, welcome to Casual Chats.
Hello, good to be here.
It is an honor for you to be here. We have been trying to get a hold of you for about 3 years, but I think that it's been well worth it, I think.
3 years? Wow, is that mostly trying to get Chris on board?
Both of you. We've been trying to get a hold of the both of you for a long time, but it's been...
Shocking. That's shocking.
I know, but we understand...
I'm sorry it's taken that long. It's, my deepest apologies, and hopefully I'll be able to make it worth your while today.
Oh, trust me. I mean, we know that you are very busy, and we are more than appreciative of you taking the time to answer our questions and tell us various stories. So, Kevin, why don't you start with the questions?
First question I have is, what was the inspiration for Pete and Pete? How did that all start? What were the origins for Pete and Pete?
Well, the inspiration was, we were, at the time, as people might know, if they're fans of the show, Chris Viscardi and myself, we were working in the promo department of Nickelodeon, which is to say we were writing, ads for the shows that were on Nickelodeon and trying to capture the spirit of Nickelodeon in different types of ways. And we had an assignment to come up with some ideas that would kind of capture, what Nickelodeon... So we were always trying to figure out on Nickelodeon how to talk to kids, not talk down to them, but talk to them the way they talk to themselves and really get things, communicate on a real kid level. And so we decided, had this idea to tell stories the way kids tell stories, which is to say, rapid fire, no great constraints on the direction your story goes, and just this kind of like stream of consciousness outpouring of narrative, the way kids tell stories, maybe a little chaotic, but with all the great details in place, and there's just a certain rhythm and spirit and kind of innocence to the way kids tell stories that we hadn't seen before, and we thought we'd figure out how to do that. So the initial 60-second little stories we told had a lot of narration in them, and the spirit of it was kid storytelling. And once we got that figured out and it felt good to us, we expanded that idea to 30 minutes, and then we ended up doing some series. But the initial inspiration was like storytelling kid style.
Cool. That's cool.
From what I understand, Chris, from Chris and you and all the other people who were involved with doing the writing the episodes of Pete and Pete, you base it off a lot of your experiences in childhood, as well as kind of like put a little surrealism twist because of your background in New York City and New Jersey, and a lot of that hip indie vibe that would be showcased in all of your colleagues' background. What made you decide to showcase it towards like kids? Do you think that because with kids, they can be able to soak it in and they can be able to get into the atmosphere and the background that you guys were familiar with? Because there weren't a lot of shows at the time that really focused a lot of that surrealism.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's funny. I mean, now that we've been doing these reunions and getting to meet the people who grew up watching the show, it kind of got our first insight into what it was like to be 11 or 12 years old and watching the show, because back when we made it, we really had no idea of what kids thought of it or how they, responded to it and what it meant to them. Because, when you make a show, you just kind of send it out into the world, and it's pretty rare that you actually get any feedback. It's just not, at least back then, before there was a lot of social media, you had no way of knowing what you were accomplishing, or if anything that you were trying to accomplish was connecting with anybody. And it's, in a funny way, in the era pre-social media, it took about, 25 years until those kids grew up, and then we went to reunions and talked to them face-to-face, that we learned that the show made a big impact. It helped a lot of people feel that they could be weird, they could be themselves, they could, listen to music and tell stories and be a part of stories that maybe weren't completely down the middle. So I think we were making, to answer your question more directly, I think we were making the show for ourselves, and we were hopeful that there would be a way for kids to connect with it, because I think it was such an unlikely show, and it came from such an unlikely place, which is to say the promo department, and it kind of had a charmed life in a way, kind of its own weird kind of animal that, it just kept changing as time went by. So I think we just thought we would plug into our own experiences and hope for the best, and then all the surrealism in the show that everyone comments on now, it was just a way for us to make it funny and kind of make it magical. I think a lot of what we were trying for was mystery. We kind of feel like there's not enough mystery in the world, and there's less of it all the time. And if we could find ways to make it strange and kind of magical and kind of unexplainable, then we were doing something good. And all these years later, I guess it turns out that it worked. So we were really gratified to hear that our kind of, I don't know, it's almost like you're sending it out into the universe. And it took about 20 years for us to get some transmissions back from the universe that we had done a good job.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when Big Pete was listening to Joe about that in the universe. Apparently, there's this football game that's being showcased now, when back then it was showcased like over 50 years ago. I guess in a way, the vast universe, maybe when the show first came out, it was something unexpected. Because a lot of the shows at the time, especially around the 90s, shows focusing for kids and teenagers, they were trying to be like the next Saved by the Bell, or they were trying to be the next sitcom like Full House. But I think something like Pete and Pete, in which it was able to showcase about being eccentric, being quirky, being kind of like this guy that is very artistic, but a lot of people just don't really understand you. It spoke to people in a way in which I guess we didn't really understand and appreciate until many years later. And I remember when I first read the article about that, when you guys were celebrating your 20th anniversary, about how you did both of the reunion panels on New York City and in Los Angeles, and both of them were like sold out immediately. And the response that you got from all the people who grew up with it, the outstanding ovations with the cast coming out and people singing along to the songs, and it must have been amazing for you, considering that from what I read in an interview from our good buddy Matthew Klickstein, who did the book Slimed: An Oral History of Nickelodeon's Golden Age, while the show was liked by a lot of people, it wasn't one of those shows that was ranking in ratings and views, but when, coming back to it, 20 years later, you see that there's as much people, if not more people, who are getting into the show than, compared almost to, 25 years ago. That must be something that you and Chris and everybody who worked on the show can be proud of.
Yeah, another way of looking at it, too, we've had some time, Chris and I have had some time to reflect on, this sort of time tunnel we've gone through from the last season of the show till recent years where we've kind of got to meet the audience 20-plus years later. I think there's sort of something cyclical about it in the sense that when we were making the show, we were kind of the age of the people who grew up with the show, and we were in our late 20s. And I've come to the conclusion that that's where, around the time where you're kind of officially starting to think of yourself as an adult, or 26, 27, 28, whatever that magic number is, I think you get very intensely nostalgic for your childhood. I think it kicks in pretty hard around that age. It maybe seems earlier than you'd expect, but I think that's when it hits. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but it hits everyone pretty hard. And since Pete and Pete was really a super nostalgic show, we wrote it because we were having nostalgia about our own childhood. So we wrote a show about our childhood with a bit of a warp to it, but it was really a reflection of our own nostalgia. So you have all these people who grew up watching a show about nostalgia, and then they get nostalgic about a show about nostalgia, and I think it's like a supernova of sentimentality, emotion, and nostalgia that really, I think, takes people over. So as much, when I look at people posting now about Pete and Pete, sometimes it's about the show, and sometimes it's just about the comfort and security and just the feeling of watching the show in their living room, whatever it was on, and just feeling those feelings that come along with being a kid, being in your house, watching your favorite show, and just kind of feeling the warmth that comes from those memories. So it's really a lot of different variables here. Some of them are just what was in the show, and some of them are about the show reminding them of their childhood, and some of it was just the fact that the show was so intensely nostalgic to begin with, that as you get older, you really start to feel it, I think, in a much more magnified way than when you were just a kid and weren't feeling nostalgic about anything.
That's a very good point. Kevin, do you have any questions?
What was the casting like for Pete and Pete, and do you have any fond memories of how the casting process went with the actors?
Yeah, I would say, my favorite moment of casting was finding Toby to play Hardy. As I look back on the show and I try to figure out what were the key, moments that made Pete and Pete so great, and I would say one of the top 2 or 3 things that happened were, one of them was hiring Toby, because I think he brings to the show something that really pushes it over the limit. And he was just like a walking, non sequitur that people were, whenever we do the reunions, Toby gets the biggest response. And I certainly can see why. And the way we found him, because everybody else we just found through the traditional route of casting agents sending, kids with 8x10s to a room where we would sit behind a table and have them read lines, and we would choose the people we thought were great. And we found some really good people that way. But with Toby, he's a grown man working at these out-of-the-way kind of performance spaces in the frontier of the East Village. And one day I got a tip about him, and I just went out to this, middle of nowhere club that I think was just someone's living room. And he had invented that character beforehand. It was something that he had as part of his repertoire of weirdo characters, and it was much more R and / X-rated than it was on the show, but suddenly there was already in full view, and I think we just had to get him for the show. And I think the biggest mystery of all is why a guy who is very serious about making it as an actor and a comedian and performance artist would agree to be on a kid's show, but he thankfully agreed to do it. And for 3 years, to me, it's like one of the greatest things that's ever happened to television is putting Toby Huss in kids' pajamas and putting him into kids' houses. I think that's perhaps the most subversive thing I can think of that's happened on kids' TV.
that's incredible, considering that, Toby, he did an amazing job as Artie, the strongest man in the world. And, that he's one of the fan favorites. A lot of people, whenever they talk about Pete and Pete, they always do like drawings of Artie, or they, dress up as Artie and like cosplays for conventions. And there's something about the character that, even though he is very non sequitur and a lot of things that he doesn't really make a lot of sense, and he over exaggerates his strength, there's something about him that, in a sense in which when we're kids, we all want to have that little superhero along our side to protect us from bullies, and, that friend who is older than us, and we can be able to do fun things with them, kind of like a child in a grown man's body. And I think that's what, resonated a lot. I guess maybe in a way, Artie is kind of like a symbol of, just because you're an adult doesn't mean you don't have to lose your childlike wonder. You don't have to worry about sticking into the society of having to become stiff and boring just because, you're past your teens. A great example on this is when they're featuring the episodes that feature the parents, and they kind of have like this little secret society of, we have to tell our kids what to do, and, we have to trick our kids to do their homework or switch off whole milk to 2%. And, we need to discipline them. We need to make sure that they don't go off the wrong beaten path. But it is true that we all have responsibilities, and it is true that we all have to abide by what the rules are said to us. But at the same time, we can't lose that youth in us. Otherwise, we'll just become nothing more than just a stick in the mud. We won't be able to be creative. We won't be able to express ourselves. And I think that's what, in my opinion, that's what Artie gave to us.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a really astute way to think of it. I think another good example of like what it was like to experience Artie as a kid, and then as you get older and come back to the show, what it's like to come back to it at that point. I think when you're a kid, he's just this bizarre superhero, and you're right. It does click into the fantasy of having your own superhero, but I think everyone who's a fan of him now, who's grown up, everyone who dresses up for it like him for Halloween. I guess today's Halloween. I suspect there's a few people across this great land of ours that are putting on their striped pajamas right now, getting ready to go trick or treating, and that's a good feeling. But I think you're right. As you get older, you look back at Toby and what he did with Artie. He's like a symbol of like not like fight back against being a grown up all the time, and try to find that part of yourself that is just outlandish, filled with non sequiturs, and just laughs at danger, And I'm glad that all these years later, he sort of is a symbol of something that has some meaning to it.
Absolutely. Kevin, do you have any other questions?
My next question was, how was what was it like in the 90s compared to, like, say today? Like, when do you think, like, when kids for today, if kids were to watch Pete and Pete, would it still be enjoyable as it was like when it first came out?
I have a 9-year-old son who watches a lot of the good stuff on TV, and with shows like Adventure Time in particular. Let's just stick with Adventure Time. The fact that show is popular, and even Sanjay and Craig, I would say too. There's a lot of Pete and Pete and Sanjay and Craig. The fact that those shows are on the air, or regular show, I guess what I'm getting at is there's a lot of shows on the air now that are just as strange and wonderful as Pete and Pete ever was. And I think at the time, it really was. Pete and Pete was a real outlier. There was nothing that was like it. I think that got in the way of it becoming a bigger success. It was kind of out on its own with no reference point, and I think a lot of people thought it was too weird to handle. But there's so many channels now, and people are taking more chances, and there's a lot of creator-driven material that has a real personal vision to it. It's not just the grind of the animation factories anymore, or live action shows that are just pure cookie cutter. So with all those other shows out in the universe, I think something like Pete and Pete would probably maybe not seem quite as singular, but I think more people would watch it, and I think it would fit in with a lot of other great stuff that maybe on some level are kind of the ancestors of Pete and Pete.
Oh yeah, I recently read an article about that there was two things about Pete and Pete. One is that Pete and Pete, it was the closest chance of an independent movie make it into mainstream television. And two was that Pete and Pete, the way that the style was, the way that it portrayed itself, it can easily just be on TV being just as innovative as it was before. Because you're right, Will, just like with Adventure Time, Regular Show, and Sanjay and Craig, all of these shows, when it features duos, and it features these two completely different characters, and they have all these great adventures together, it's similar to like Pete and Pete, in which they have all these crazy adventures together, but at the same time there's a bit of realism in it. And I think that with that, a lot of people can be able to see Pete and Pete, and they can be able to say to themselves, you know, I can see that in me. I can see me going through those things. I can see that childhood that I went through, that the characters are being portrayed. So I think so. Do you have anything else, Kevin?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, I have a few questions, Will. Okay, so I need to know one thing, and, you know, it's been talked about for a while. It's been debated on the internet for pretty much a decade, and Matthew even asked this question at the Slime Book event, but there was an MTV article around 2007 that talked about that the adventures of Pete and Pete created the modern-day hipster. What is your opinion on that?
Well, remind me, what's the hypothesis?
Okay, the hypothesis is this. One of them is that the main protagonists were redheads. The other one is that everyone wore flannel, and, you know, if you go over to a place like Austin or upstate New York or Seattle, a lot of people kind of like wear those like flannel clothes, or the style of clothes that Pete and Pete wore. Another one was the type of music that was being played, like Polaris, Magnetic Field, Sid Straw, The Sixth, Luscious Jackson, all the music that was being portrayed, you know, at the time they probably would have used like some sort of pop music or some grunge, but the music was indie rock. And a lot of people thought that, you know, independent music is getting really, really big out there nowadays. And a lot of people, when looking back on Pete and Pete, it's like, hey, you know, these people have been playing indie music even before indie music was popular. And, you know, indie radio stations are becoming a thing nowadays. Local radio stations are being more open to playing indie music. And then a lot of people say that Mr. Tasty's ice cream truck is the equivalent of the modern day food truck. And I know, that's kind of funny. And, you know, so on and so forth. And what is your opinion on that?
Well, I would say, I mean, you know, it's hard to know what to say. It's something you'd expect to find in someone trying to be generational about a topic. It's hard to know. I mean, it's certainly, like anything that's hip, that's really hip, and that's really good. It never starts off intending to be hip. You know, that's, if you're intending to be hip, you'll never be hip. And Pete and Pete had its hipster quotient, of course, with its cameos, and especially with its music. But it was really just an attempt to make a show with the things in it that we like. I mean, so much. I mean, as far as the Indian music goes, I don't know if this has been said before, but you know, there's a certain wistfulness to Pete and Pete, a certain bittersweetness to a lot of the stories. A lot of the music, indie rock that we like, had the same quality. So it was easy to match the music to the shows, and in fact, the music oftentimes guided the tone of the show. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, we certainly wanted to make a hip show that was cool, but I don't think that was our main emphasis. We just wanted to make a show that was personal and spoke to the way we saw childhood, and also spoke to our incredible nostalgia for our own childhoods. And the things that people took away from it, you know, I mean, just to look at a few specifics, the flannel, I don't know, it's hard to say that, I don't even, we had one kid who wore a flannel shirt, so I don't know, you could take that as you will. And as far as the cameos, I don't know, I don't think any kid who watched the show knew who any of those people were in the first place, so I don't really know exactly how much influence it had over them, but it's nice to think that we're some sort of generational marker. I will take that praise, but I also dispute it.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Speaking of the music, I love the Pete and Pete soundtrack. I currently own the entire soundtrack on my iPhone, and I listen to it all the time. All the the songs from Polaris, they are just incredible, and I am so happy that Polaris is currently on tour because they deserve it. And from what I've been hearing on articles and their tweets and people who went to see the show, they are loving it. And there's packed houses. There's people who are coming from like hundreds of miles just to see them. So it must be amazing to hear that after all these years with it was like a fictional band. They were supposed to be there for that one show. They already had their own thing with like Miracle Legion, but in that sense, Polaris was like that band that we hear the music and we don't really appreciate about all the scenes that are going on until that one little cue, like, at the episode of Halloweeny in which you see, Little Pete and Big P walking, into the moonlight and then Waiting for October plays, or if there's a sad moment, with Pete or with Little Pete, we hear, like, let's say Why I Cry, in which Artie leaves, or, also, Summer Baby, in which Little P hears the song for the first time at the garage band, or, anything like that. I mean, just little things like that is what, draws people into the music. And all the bands that you gotten were astonishing. And, it's just incredible about how eclectic the soundtrack is. I even said this myself, that, in my opinion, The Adventures of Pete and Pete has the most eclectic soundtrack in all of the Nickelodeon shows. It is so varied, and it is so good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's like... good to hear you have all the songs. That's pretty hardcore. The most hardcore thing you could do would be to somehow find, probably on the internet somewhere, because we did the specials with a whole set of music that was even more indie rock than what was ended up being in the series. Because once we went to the series, all the even more sort of indie rock acts had to be replaced by different songs because it had to do with music rights and all kind of complicated legal technicalities that are too boring to get into, but we kind of had to start over when we did Polaris, which we didn't have when we did the specials originally. So Polaris did a lion's share of the soundtrack stuff, and that ended up replacing a lot of other songs that were part of the original Pete and Pete special. So if you can, I don't know, maybe you have these songs, but if you really want to give yourself a project, you should find those songs that were from the specials, because there's like about a half dozen songs that never made it to prime time.
That would be a really good project. For any of you listeners out there, if you want to be able to find the songs that were played in the specials, but not in the series, go for it. It will be awesome if you do that. Speaking of...
I will say this. I have something that reminds me of something else I wanted to say it's worth mentioning, which is people are always wondering what happened to the third season of the Pete DVD releases. And,
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, well, it always comes up, and we end up talking about it at the conventions or the reunions, and we're kind of like self-deprecating about the whole thing because Pete's all about being a cult show that never quite broke through, so we all kind of wear that as a badge of honor. But deep down, we're all really kind of irritated that the third season didn't come out, and now that Kristen and I are back at Nickelodeon doing Sanjay and Craig, we've been able to do a little detective work, and it really just comes down to, I guess, whatever it costs to get the music rights for the third season, which just involves getting all these indie bands paid. I guess either it's too expensive or it's too much trouble, but that's the reason that nobody gets to watch those on DVD. It's just some kind of legal tangle and financial inconvenience of getting those rights cleared, and it will probably never come out. In fact, if you watch, Nickelodeon now has this thing called the Splat. I don't know if you guys know about that, where they're repackaging all the 90s shows in a much more concentrated way with promos, and they're really attempting to tap into that generation who grew up with the shows. And if you tune into Teen Nick, I think after 11 o'clock, you'll see all the shows you grew up with, except Pete and Pete, because those same music rights, which are impeding the third season of the DVDs, are also impeding its allowing to be aired on Nickelodeon at all. So there's yet another Pete and Pete hole that someone has to fill someday.
Trust me, if you were ever to get that whole mess untangled and you do release season 3, I will be the first one to buy it. Kevin will be second.
Yeah.
Well, the rumor is that they're all the DVDs are in some warehouse in New Jersey, just waiting to be put onto a truck. So I'm always hopeful that some really industrious fans will break into the warehouse, mount some sort of Ocean's 11 type operation and just sort of bring them back. They're like they're kind of been held for ransom, so somebody needs to free them and bring them back into the world.
That would be awesome. While we're still on the subject, from what I understand from reading from another article from Matthew, as well as various articles online, what was the story behind the unreleased Pete and Pete movie being converted into Snow Day?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Well, it's funny. I was just watching Snow Day the other day. It shows up a lot as the weather gets colder. It seems like it's on HBO every now and then. So I was watching it with my son and kind of wincing, as I sometimes do when I watch it, because it's not as good as it was intended to be. And back when it was a Pete and Pete movie, full on, it was much more like the show, which is to say, much less concerned with conventional narrative, with conventional jokes, and conventional, storytelling techniques. It was more like a show, which is to say, was a little bit more surreal and tripped out and absolutely unhinged. But I would say maybe like 7 or 8 years went past between the time we wrote that script and the time that they decided they wanted to make it. And in between, the show had ended, all the kids had grown up, and it was no longer an option. And so we kind of recasted it and, made, if you ever watch the movie, there's definitely a little Pete, Big Pete dynamic with a grown-up and an older brother who's, a boy. But in the process of, and I think we still had every intention, even though we had a new cast, because we had people like Damian Young and Iggy Pop were in that movie, so there's still a chance for it to be, echoes of the show. But as people often say, when you work for a big, it's a Paramount movie, there's just a homogenizing machine at work that just ends up rubbing and kind of sanding down the corners. That movie had a lot of stuff. I wish there were some deleted scenes up there. I wish they would put the deleted scenes onto the DVD. There's probably half a dozen scenes that any fan of the show would just, just feel so poignant about, because if they'd been put in the movie, I think it would have resembled the show a lot more. I think people who have watched it and maybe thought, this doesn't seem that good, might have felt better about it. But it was just a combination of kids growing up and the Paramount movie machine just really wanting to make it feel like something people had seen before. Right. And it's such a shame, because it would have been really nice to have seen a Pete and Pete feature film. Was the plot I know, I agree. Well, maybe we'll do it. There's always been a fantasy of doing some sort of Pete and Pete project where you get Michael and Danny playing themselves grown up, but still as Pete and Pete, and perhaps it would be fun to see what little Pete's children would be like, and maybe someday we'll do something with it, like the next generation approach to the show. We can see the children of the Pete's being the age of the kids were when the show first aired. Hey, if Girl Meets World can do it, why not Pete and Pete? Exactly. Was the plot and the story of the Pete and Pete movie different from Snow Day, or was it pretty much the same? Because from what I saw Snow Day, it definitely felt like the plot of the episode Oh Christmas Pete. It had like similar structures, and it had like similar events that happened, like, Garbage Man and then it would be Snowplow Man, and, instead of taking place around Christmas, it was taking place around a snow day. And then, of course, like you said before about, you have the older brother, the little sister, and the best friend to the older brother, and so on and so forth. No, I think you're right. I think there was, in a lot of Pete and Pete episodes, you often saw after a season where Big Pete was getting older, you got a lot of conflict between the two brothers as one was growing up and wanting to move on to more grown-up things, and Little Pete wanting his brother to still be his best friend. And that sort of conflict between brothers as they grow apart because they're growing older. As you know, it's noted that was a big part of that plot as well. So that's very reminiscent of a lot of Pete and Pete stories. You know, I would say that it's not so much the overall story that was different. I think going back to what you were asking before, the Pete and Pete show was shot like an indie movie, which you know it wasn't so concerned with creating something. It was more concerned with just sort of being personal and maybe taking things that are small and making them feel big. And I think you know, the script got sanded down, and it was much more kind of focused on jokes and characters that you could connect to. But I think what it was lacking most of all was this sort of independent spirit that came from the way we shot it and the way we thought of it. I mean, I think Hal Hartley was more of an inspiration for the TV show, and I think the inspiration for the movie, unfortunately, ended up being something like I don't know, like a Disney movie or something. So it just lost its way in terms of its tone, I think.
Yeah, and, you know, no disrespect to you or Chris, none whatsoever. However, I did feel that there were some things that, it did feel like a Pete and Pete story, but there was just some things in it that I felt were kind of out of place. Like, you know, like the whole love triangle thing. I mean, we've seen Big Pete falling in love with Ellen throughout the series, and while it, you know, there was one episode that kind of like, you know, said that they were having like some sort of feelings for them, it was never fully official. It felt like it was ambiguous. And the same thing with like Little Pete and Nona, in which when they were starting off as friends, they kind of had sort of a little crush on one another, but again, that was a bit ambiguous. And you know, there was also some little plot points and additions that just felt a little bit not needed, like, you know, for, you know, some of the characters or maybe some of the settings and some of the little story bits here and there. But I can understand that, you know, maybe it wasn't the project that you know, you and Chris didn't envision, but you know, I know that, you know, someday, you know, hopefully, maybe you'll be able to have another chance to tell the story that you wanted to, because trust me, a lot of people would love to see it. And, you know, from, you know, the reunions, like you were saying, the reunions are amazing. Like, you know, at the time of this recording, Stanley's Kamikaze convention in California is going on right now, and they're having a huge reunion panel with Danny and Mike doing their podcast, and I listen to their podcast all the time, and you know, some of the cast members of All That are there, and you know, they've done like numerous reunion panels, and the Funny or Die skit, in which that took place around the 20th anniversary Pete and Pete reunion panel, which was amazing, by the way. There's still a huge love for Pete and Pete, and, you know, with the 25th anniversary around the corner, you know, I'm sure that you guys will come up with something great, and, you know, trust me when I say this, like I said earlier, the fan base is just as big, if not bigger, than it was like over 20 years ago. I know young teenagers who are not even 13 who love Pete and Pete.
That's great to hear. I think, like you said, I think, that's good to hear you say that. I don't really know. I know there's a lot of 28-year-olds who grew up with it and you know, love it to death. And, you know, I've seen so many. You know, your show has made some sort of generational impact when you see, you know, at least I've looked at least 100 people that have an actual petunia tattoo. You know, you've made a dent in the consciousness when people are actually going through that kind of agony and permanence to have you know, a almost naked lady put onto their arm. So that's always gratifying. But it's good to hear. I don't really have any sense of 13-year-olds watching it, so I'm glad to hear you say that.
Oh, trust me, I will let them know that you are very thankful for it. What are some of your favorite episodes?
Oh, well, I like Hard Day's Pete is a big one because it's just about loving music, you know, and how far you'll go to, you know, how far you go to kind of like fight for your favorite song. And I like that episode just for its sort of indie rock spirit, you know, and I think it's sort of articulates articulates very clearly what's maybe just more hinted at in a lot of shows. I think it's just really a direct way of saying that music is crucial. Your favorite song is as important as your blood type, and Little Pete's a character you should admire and you should follow. To do what you can to pursue something that you love, and if it's music, even better. Other than that, I would say the summer vacation one looms large. It was back when we were really not sure what we were doing. This was the second special we ever did, and stylistically, it was a huge leap ahead of Valentine's Day Massacre, which I think is a great episode, but kind of hard to watch in some ways because it's not really. It's kind of like watching 30, 50-second vignettes in a row. Whereas Summer Vacation, opened itself up. It was paced better. It felt more like a little movie. And I think I love that just because it captures the sadness of summer ending in a way that gets me every time. I haven't had summer vacation in many a year, but come September, I still feel sad. I still feel that feeling of like, oh my God, I got to go back to school. And so I think those emotions we all carry with us through our rest of our lives. And the fact that show is really just this kind of like love song to summer makes me feel good. So I think those two episodes have a lot of impact.
Oh yeah, definitely. Kevin, what are your some favorite?
And also, I would say too. Just we'll throw two more in there.
Sure.
The Artie two-part. Sure, just because I'm thinking of it, the Artie two-parter is a big deal as well. Just because that really is directly about it's about the Magic Dragon story, and I think it's by far the most emotional story we ever did. I think it's made more than a few people cry, myself included. So just for an episode that really, we had to say goodbye to the actor. He was moving on. We had to say goodbye. Little P had to say goodbye to his best friend, and on some level say goodbye to his childhood as well. So it's kind of a triple decker there, and still admire that show for its commitment to complete and utter pathos.
Yeah.
I think the show itself is great. It definitely has 90s nostalgia to it, and I think the music definitely plays a huge, important role to the show. I remember that's what I most of P was the music. Aside from the very good storytelling and the very, the actors being well acting, it was really the music that really made it so memorable. And even how it was great that it took all certain musics to sort of go with each scene. I think that was brilliant,
Your favorite episodes, Kevin?
I have a lot. It's really hard to pick. I don't like picking favorite episodes. It's so hard. It's like saying how about you, Patty?
Well, okay. That is a pretty heavy question, I must say. But I did a list on my top 10 favorite Pete and Pete episodes around the time in which Pete and Pete was celebrating its 20th anniversary. My favorite episode of all time from Pete and Pete, in my personal opinion, it was the Nightcrawlers. The Nightcrawlers is a great way of showcasing that that sense of childhood in which little Pete wants to break the world record of staying up the longest at a total of 11 nights. And, showcasing that, he doesn't need his bedtime anymore. And then everybody is participating. And the way that it ends, you would think that little Pete would be, would be reprimanded for breaking the rules of his bedtime. But no, his mother and little Pete have an agreement to one another. And they're able to treat each other like equals, saying I completely understand on that maybe we should move up your bedtime, but at the same time, you do need to go to bed on a certain time because you need your rest for you to, go to school, for you to play, for you to just go do your daily activities. And any other parent, they probably would have punished their child or the parents wouldn't even care. But no, not only did the mom acknowledge the fact that little Pete was trying to say, I'm grown up, I don't need this bedtime anymore, but they're able to compromise. And compromising with your parents is not something that you see a lot in TV shows. For the most part, either the parent's not around or they're constantly arguing, which that was fantastic to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was Chris's first episode that he had ever written. He hadn't written any episodes up to that point because he was mostly interested in producing. But once we started doing the series, he basically had to start writing because there just wasn't enough writers to write all the episodes. So he sat down to write his first episode, and it was Nightcrawlers, and it's a pretty spectacular episode. I think it was very personal to him. I think it really spoke to his relationship with his own mother, and that guided him in writing it. And you can really tell it really feels like, as surreal as the show is, its emotional core oftentimes is pretty solid. That episode's a good example of that.
Oh, yeah. Kevin, I remember that you were telling me a while ago that one of your favorite episodes was Pinned, where Big P joins the wrestling team.
Yeah, that was a great episode. That was one of my favorites. I also like the night episode as well. That was a great episode, too.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's an episode where I think we the most surreal moment ever in any Pete and Pete episode is when Endless Mike, I guess he hot wires a hand dryer in the bathroom, and it actually sucks the kid into the machine and kills him. So that's a surprise for our audience, and I don't think we ever killed anybody on the show, so that's why I like the show.
Yeah,
murder. There was murdering going on in the show.
Right, exactly. All right, one final question about Pete and Pete, and then I want to move over to your other projects. What did you take away from Pete and Pete?
Well, I think it's the first show I ever did, and it's the most freedom I ever had to do a show that was true to everything that I believed in. So I think what I took away from it allowed me to distill a vision, an aesthetic that was probably in many different pieces, looking to be unified in some way. And the show was a way of like a lens that allowed me to take all those different sources of inspiration and just focus it into one kind of overarching point of view. And I've carried that point of view with me ever since. And most times I get to take some version of that point of view at some level of intensity and plug it into things that I'm working on, which is important to me. And the things that I'm unable to access that vision and use for what I'm working on, those tend to be, my least, like the Chipmunks movie, for example. Those are the projects that seem less satisfying. So, yeah, I would say the big takeaway for me was a chance to bring all these different things together and create one, overall look at life, at least being a kid, and kind of carry that with me and all the other things that I work on.
That's great. And I'm glad that you were able to take what you were learning and, put it in your other projects because, something like KaBlam, for example, in which you, Chris, and your collaborators with the artists, it was a really creative show in which it showcased different styles of animation. In fact, I always kind of, every time that I saw Life with Loopy, it almost kind of reminded me of Pete and Pete in a way, because you have the teenager who's a redhead and he's narrating about his younger sister, and there's a whole bunch of surreal stuff going on in their life, whether it be, digging under the couch and there happens to be a giant universe under there, to apparently the mom has been hiding an alien under their basement for 20 years, and the secret to Loopy not being able to shower, and apparently she becomes like this gigantic hedge, and also let's see what else. There was also the mysteries of what's in Mom's casserole, just little things here and there, and also the music, the opening theme being Two-Tone Army by the Toasters, and a lot of people like They Might Be Giants were able to make guest appearances. And yeah, I think that, that's a really great example on that. Would you tell us about, the process of doing KaBlam?
Sure, yeah. Well, after, towards the end of the Pete and Pete production period, which was like 93 through 95, Bob Mittensall, he's the third third partner in KaBlam, along with Chris and myself. We all came together and wanted to do a show that was like, an anthology. So we kind of, I I think a lot of times the instinct is how can we sneak something that's sort of more left to the center than Nickelodeon is comfortable with. How can we sneak something like that on the air? And that project, I think what made Nickelodeon like it was the fact that in a way every episode was piloting, half dozen shows, and if any of them caught on, like if Action League Now or Life with Loopy caught on, that would be a way, that would be a springboard to making a series out of one of those miniature stories. And so that sort of, from a tactical standpoint, the network thought that KaBlam was a great idea, and gave us the freedom to work with all these artists that had never done TV before. And everyone has their favorite segments from KaBlam, but I think it ran for I forget how many years it ran.
It ran for
5 years.
4 years.
4 years, yeah. And we made at least 60 episodes, and people don't talk about KaBlam as much as Pete and Pete, but whenever I run into somebody who talks about KaBlam, I have this instinct to hug them because it was a great show, and I think it gets kind of overlooked.
Yeah, it definitely does, which is a shame, really, because I think there's a lot of creative things about KaBlam. And being able to use different styles of animation and being able to tell different stories was really creative. Now, just like with Pete and Pete, there was apparently supposed to be a movie for KaBlam based off of Prometheus and Bob. What's the story behind that?
Yeah. That's true. That was, you've really done your research. That was, I think Paramount. Yeah, Paramount wanted to do a movie based on Prometheus and Bob, which is, you're not a fan of KaBlam. It was a stop motion vignette on KaBlam about a alien who is trying to teach a caveman the ways of intelligent beings, and it's just nonstop killing their frustration as the caveman is just too stupid to handle anything that the alien wants him to try to learn. And it was done kind of like a silent comedy. There was no dialogue. It was just pure slapstick and pure frustration, and it almost felt like it could have come from a different era. And somebody decided that was the best vignette to turn into a movie, and I know that actually a Pete writer who's probably wrote the best episodes, a guy by the name of Joe Stillman. He was hired to write the movie, and I know for sure that Chris Farley was going to play the caveman, and I think maybe David Spade was going to play the chemistry those guys had from the Tommy Boy movies. I think they were going to replicate that as a David Spade as the persnickety alien, and Chris Farley as the slapstick dumb guy. They were going to come together, and Joe was going to write the script. And I think the script did get written, but it just ended up, like a lot of good things, just ended up going nowhere. But all those things did happen. I'd kind of forgotten about that. I didn't, at least the fact that a script got written at all based on that story is pretty amazing. And somewhere in some drawer, that script is still there, waiting for someone to find it.
I had no idea about that. I had no idea that Chris Farley and David Spade were going to be in the movie. Was there going to be talking? Because Prometheus and Bob, they didn't have any talking in the short.
Yeah, I think they were talking at that show, and actually, whether or not Chris and David Spade were actually signed to be in the movie, I'm not 100% sure about that. I know that they were the first choice, but I would not want to go on the record and say they had agreed to be in the movie. But I think that was what they were hoping to do, and I think that's what got people excited, thinking about those two guys cast in those two roles, because they would have been perfect. So I won't go as far as to say that that was the hope and the dream of that project. But as far as the script, yeah, it was written, and it could even be that there wasn't that much dialogue. They may have stayed true to the original vignette. I'm not really sure. It's hard to imagine that being the case, but I think if you ever talk to Joe, he'll tell you more about it.
Huh. I definitely need to get a hold of Joe if I ever do. That is pretty cool. I never knew about that. Especially since, if it were to be like little to no talking, I could imagine it would be kind of like WALL-E, in which, everything is like silent and atmospheric, and then
silence is golden, so that actually would work.
Yeah, definitely, silence is golden, and that would have been really cool to see that being very atmospheric and showcasing on these two characters and a lot of slapstick. That would have been pretty interesting. Now, would the story would have been like a prequel, or would it have continued from where the show was?
I don't know. It could have been an origin story, where the alien comes down for the first time. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure where they started the timeline on.
Okay. Now, after KaBlam, for a while, you did your own, other projects. Like we were saying earlier, you did the Alvin and Chipmunks movie, The Tale of Disparow, and, also executive producing for Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging. And then eventually, you and Chris went over to do Sanjay and Craig. So how did you finally get back to New York after all these years? I mean, Nickelodeon.
Well, we started at Nickelodeon, and it was, kind of, I think our experience there was so integral to the rest of our lives that we always hoped we'd go back someday, because it's sort of like your alma mater in a way, where so all the secrets were discovered. And at some point, I guess around 2012, a woman by the name of Audrey Deal, who's a development person at Nickelodeon, had to find out who could executive produce this new show they were going to air called Sanjay and Craig, because Jim and Jay, the creators of the show, had never done a show before, and they would need some EPs to actually do the physical running of the show, and be the writers and just kind of provide some guidance for the show, because it's mounting an animated series is it's like like 300,000 moving parts. So Audrey was a fan of our work, and she was just trying to imagine who would be the best fit. And she thought of us, and we met Jim and Jay, and we watched the pilot of Sanjay and Craig, and instantly fell in love with the guys and with the show and with the idea of coming back. And as it happened, it was good timing, because Nickelodeon then and now are kind of more interested in getting connected to what they've done in the past in terms of airing material, in terms of capturing the spirit of the things they did back then. And, we were in the right place at the right time, and we got the job, and spent the last 3 years making 60 episodes of Sanjay and Craig, and having a really great experience. And as we said a couple of times, as we thought about this Sanjay and Craig as it related to Pete and Pete, Pete and Pete is a show that most people would associate with the furthest extremes of what Nickelodeon can do. Sanjay and Craig, went way beyond anything we did on Pete and Pete, and with a lot more freedom. I mean, that show, if you've ever watched it, it's, I think it's got a reputation for pushing the limits of grossness, and we certainly have that element. But if you really watch a dozen shows, you'll see that there's all kinds of things that show does that you wouldn't think would be possible on a kids network, and the network was really behind it. And I think on some level they were hopeful that they could go back to being a network that took more chances, and that's what Sanjay and Craig was. And I think that's part of the reason we were brought on board, kind of be the mentors in that direction. So it's 60 episodes of coming of age in the suburbs with a talking snake instead of I guess the talking snake is the equivalent of Artie or something, but it ended up being popular and wild, and also really honest show about childhood.
Have you ever thought about maybe doing another show for Nickelodeon, or maybe doing another project, whether it be another movie or another TV show, or maybe something for online?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now that Sanjay and Craig is our work on that show is over now. Chris and I are sort of connected. We're continuing to work at Nickelodeon and continuing to pitch shows, and some are animated, some are live action. But we're in the mix of the people who the network is depending on to keep Nickelodeon fresh and competitive. So look, I'm sure over the next couple of years you'll see a show that comes from us, and hopefully it'll be as good as Pete and Pete.
Oh, well, we will definitely look forward to it when it comes out. That's for sure.
Definitely.
All right, I think that should be enough questions for me. So, do you have anything to plug or self-promote right before we go?
Don't think so.
Any upcoming
think,
projects? Anything for people to tune into?
Well, Chris and I are executive producing a Christmas special for Nickelodeon that'll be coming out next Christmas, not this Christmas, but next Christmas. It's got the voices of Rob Riggle and Judah Friedlander and a couple other SNL type people from the world of comedy. So it's got a hipster voice cast, and it's about a little Christmas tree that dreams of being in the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, and it's heartwarming but subversive, and it'll be making your Christmas wonderful in 2016. So get your 2-year calendar out and write that down. It'll be coming out a year from now.
And what's it called again?
It's called at the moment it's called Albert. It'll probably be called something else, but I'm guessing it's the only Christmas special that's about a Christmas tree. So if you see anything related to a little Christmas tree that could, chances are it's this show. I do have one other thing to plug. It occurs to me.
Of course. Yeah, definitely.
This is much better than having everyone not write it down on their calendar, which would be we're doing one more reunion at the San Francisco Sketch Fest in January next year, 2016. So coming up in a couple of months, there's a big 2-week-long comedy festival in San Francisco. We did the Sketch Fest a couple of years ago, and it was a blast. And they've asked us back, and we're going to be doing the thing we do when we bring the cast back and answer questions and tell stories and read scripts. So one of the things we like to do now is we get the cast and also guest stars to show up on stage, and we sort of recreate people's favorite moments from favorite scripts. So that's all happening in San Francisco, and that's actually something you can go to and buy tickets for. So it's a real thing.
All right, wonderful. And that is episode 50 of Casual Chats. After going on for 3 years with many people and discussing about many topics, this is a great way to celebrate. So, Will, once again, thank you so much for being a special guest on our podcast. It is an honor for you to be here.
Well, thanks. I'm glad it's an honor for me to be on your, what is it? You said 50th show, right? That's
this is 50. Yeah, we've been doing this for 3 years, and it's been amazing. So yeah, it was great for having you here.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I hope you do 50 more. Appreciate you guys keeping the Pete and Pete spirit going, and that's always a good thing.
Oh, definitely.
Trust me.
Yeah, we really do. And that concludes this episode of Casual Chats. We hope to do 50 more, and we hope to see you in the next one. So, see you later.
And it's coming round to run away or disappear. It's coming round to run away or disappear. Try climbing up those frozen stairs.